Oh, by the way, I brought this guy out just to see if you can see him. My little Cyclops right there.
That's funny. I have one of my own right here. They can say hi to each other.
Oh, excellent. They can see eye to eye.
Oh man. Thanks again for joining us on an impromptu comic shop talk interview review session about Christopher Nolan's big summer blockbuster, The Odyssey. My name is Lex Fajardo. I'm a cartoonist and creator, and this summer I've been doing Kid Beowulf Odyssey, which some of you may have seen on Kickstarter. And I've been doing a series of shop talks where I've been chatting with creators who have an interest in classical material. And today I'm joined by friend and colleague and fellow cartoonist Patrick Lugo, creator of Tiger's Tail. And tell me the name of the next one. It's a
Undead
very
Kung Fu Ghost Killer.
Undead Kung Fu Ghost Killer. Could you get a more inviting and intriguing title than that? And Patrick, you are also a reviewer of movies for Kung Fu magazine. Is that right?
That is correct. Yeah, I was art director for that magazine for a long, long time, right? When I joined the company, there was just like this black and white rag. You could order ninja stars from the back. And then by the time I completed my tenure there, we were pretty much a mainstream, full color magazine. And one of the side effects was because we had achieved a certain level of status, we had a lot of press opportunities that would come our way. It began with if you can remember back to when Kung Fu movies kind of started flooding Western theaters, we were involved with that. Like we were the first people to put The Matrix on a magazine cover because we had that inside track. And so since then, we just started doing online reviews, which were often focused on our readership who are martial artists, right? And so they're all interested in the fight choreography. So if it's got a sword, it counts. And then a side effect also is the boom of the MCU, where the superhero movies, the fight choreography is also really important. And so a lot of those choreographers who came to the US from Hong Kong back in the 90s are now doing work with a lot of young martial artists who are finding careers as stuntmen. And so together, they're behind a lot of the big action spectacles that we watch in the theaters today.
Wow, that's a really cool confluence of uh the magazine, because you are a martial artist yourself, so you have that thread of the magazine, your life as an art director, and then the other tangent of just being a lifelong lover of movies and comics. So that's a really cool combination of all those interests. And how long have you been with Kung Fu Magazine then?
I joined the staff at Kung Fu Magazine in the 90s, 1995. So
Okay.
thereabouts. The memory gets a little dim, but I definitely like. We can put it this way: Tiger's Tail, the uh, the graphic novel I'm most famous, huh? The graphic novel that's gotten given back the most to me would be a more accurate way to describe it, right? That originally started as a comic strip in the back pages of Kung Fu Magazine, and we're now this year celebrating like 30 years since those first, single page comics were published in the magazine.
Okay. Well,
So
so wait, so for folks who've not seen Tiger's Tail, either in the comic strip or its new iteration of the graphic novel, tell us a little bit about what it is.
so Tiger's Tail began as a comic strip intended to explain the more obscure aspects of martial arts in comics form for like the beginner martial artists. And this kind of came about because as art director for Kung Fu Magazine, there would be a language barrier with some of the Chinese martial artists that were coming to the studio for photo shoots. So I would draw out little comics for them, like really, really rough. Like, can we do this pose? Can we do that? And oh, and hey, by the way, let me just draw a quick sketch of you just to break the ice. And that would kind of work so that they would it would bring out the best in them for the photo shoot. But they would also start using the photo shoots as an opportunity to teach lessons. And some of them were like actual hardcore martial arts lessons. I get knocked around because I was inexperienced enough to say yes and get in front of the camera, right? I learned since to stay behind the camera and let someone else be the fall guy. But aside from the martial art lessons, they would teach us they would go into like their origin stories and like the folklore and the folk mythology behind their martial arts. And that's just something that I just really grabbed onto, being a lifelong lover of mythology. And so A Tiger's Tale, which started as just Tiger's Tale, a small absurd distinction, was just like the tale of two twins who were found in the forest, raised by the queen of tigers, the tiger, the queen of the jungle, and they absorbed all like the wisdom of the forest, the wisdom of nature, and then they just kind of wander around and have adventures. So that was like the serialized version where they would encounter a situation. If the cover featured, let's say, monkey kung fu, or like the cover of the magazine, then that back page comic would be about the origins of monkey kung fu, or it would be about our pal Sun Wukong, the Monkey King. So that just became the mission. So the graphic novel just became the culmination of like those serialized tales, and it became more like from the perspective of like the tiger, right? Like why is the tiger considered the king of beasts among martial artists? It's a common symbol within many martial arts, the nature of, tiger, a creature of nature amongst dragons, like mythical, deities and that sort of thing. So Tiger's Tale is about all of those questions and curious things that we've all kind of absorbed, because martial arts is kind of everywhere.
Yeah, no, that's a great description. And so folks who are listening to this, who are familiar with my work, can already see the similar strands of our interests. You know, the Eastern versus Western mythologies. I mean, any story where you have twins, that's got to be good, right? And then sort of that going through mythological spaces and growing up and learning and through you, it's martial arts and kung fu. For me, it's the Western tradition of epic, but there's this great convergence. So yeah, I've been lucky enough to watch you take that comic strip and turn it into this really great graphic novel series, and I think maybe even develop into Forest Tales. Am I right in thinking that Undead Kung Fu Ghost Killer is sort of perhaps a spin-off?
Yeah, it kind of takes place in the same universe. I could actually point to a couple of pages in A Tiger's Tale Volume 2 that just very briefly, like while the characters are up there in the cosmos amongst dragons, there's bad stuff happening in the world down below. And so Undead Kung Fu Ghost Killer kind of slots right into that, like the long dark night of, bad stuff happening when all hell breaks loose, we can say.
And that's inspired by a specific legend. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, it's inspired by literature's oldest Ghostbuster, we could say, right? So he's a legendary folk deity known as Zhonghui, who his story is that he's trying to be like a palace guard and he's a real badass, but he ends up failing his test, not because he wasn't like skilled enough or intelligent enough. It was either court politics or that he was just so ugly that the emperor, who was vain, just rejected him, right? So that's like the dark origin. So Zhonghui dies alone and just not like a nobody. But in the afterlife, he ends up like, in the traditional lore, he ends up saving the emperor from a nightmare, right? Like the emperor is visited by some demons in his dreams. And of course, we're talking so long ago, right? Like the literature, like the Odyssey, right? The literature is really old, but then it's also telling a story that's even older, if that makes sense. Like it's talking about a past behind them. And so that story, Zhonghui comes into the dreams and banishes the ghosts, causing the emperor to recover from his illness, right? Because demons and ghosts and fevers and all of that were once like kind of one thing, we could say. The hero Zhonghui became like a magical totem, right? He told the emperor, all you have to do to scare away ghosts is have a painting of me, right? And so he is so scary that he scares ghosts away. So like, just by having this around, I'm safe from
Yeah,
ghosts,
yeah.
demons.
I love your depiction of him. It's fun and cartoony, but at the same time, like the book, there's some tense slaying of monsters and blood and guts and it's a little over the top, but I think in the best way, like perhaps a callback to these kung fu films that you were talking about earlier. Am I right about that?
For sure. There's like almost a whole I was writing about some of this, but there's a whole subgenre, and you even see this especially within samurai movies, that is very much about how much red paint can they use in the action. So there's kind of like a specific sub genre that has to do with just that kind of gushing, very messy action. You could even imagine, if you remember Kill Bill Volume 1, there are some scenes that really kind of call back to that same aesthetic, that same
Right.
gag. So
Yeah.
Undead Kung Fu Ghost Killer was definitely created for the older kids who read Tiger's Tail when they were younger, and now they want something that's a little bit more eek and ooh, like. And I remember reading comics that were maybe above my age level, so those are the kind of comic readers I'd like to kind of have something for as well.
Yeah, no, that's smart. It's always good to branch out, and especially if you can do it within a comic or cartoon universe that is of your own creation. Um, it just sort of broadens the tendrils, and I think you bring in past readers, you can get new readers. It's I super enjoyed reading um, the book and seeing what you were doing with it, and I really loved that it was still part of that universe. So speaking of universes, and I'm going to throw up some links so folks who are following this can discover your own Plugo universe. But we are here to discuss the universe of the Odyssey, Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey that just came out this past weekend to great fanfare. Um, you did a review for it that folks can find at kungfumagazine.com. Is that a good guess?
That's the
Okay.
one.
Okay. So we can direct folks to that. But before we get into our take or our review of Nolan's Odyssey, let's get a baseline for each other about how we came to the Odyssey originally, whether it was the poem or storybook or what have you. Maybe touch on a couple of film adaptations that have come prior to this one, and then we can dive into our take on Nolan's version. So, Patrick, tell me, how did you first discover the Odyssey, and if there's a filmic version of it that's a favorite of yours, or that you have that some elements that you admire, elucidate on that too.
Well, I've been thinking about this because, writing the article, the review kind of made me realize that some form of the Odyssey might have been one of my first works of prose that I read as a little kid. Like I learned to read English by borrowing my older brother's comics. And so that trend kind of continued where I would kind of start borrowing some of his books. So I think that there was like a more classics illustrated comic book adaptation of the Odyssey that I had read. And I had like almost at the same time discovered that my brother's English class, he was maybe a senior at the time, they were covering the Odyssey. And so he had like one of those high school readers that I ended up grabbing and just reading it. And, that connection of like the same characters in the comic, but now in prose with more details just really like kind of lit up my love for reading. So I mean, I remember turning in a book report. Maybe it was the Iliad, but it wasn't on the reading list that our English teacher had assigned. And so I was initially she didn't want to take the report because I had drawn some of the monsters or whatever on it. And so she thought it was just like, oh, me being weird. And then she figured out that, oh, I was reading, way above my reading level at the time. I got an A plus plus. I got access to like the closet of books that the library, I mean, not the library, the school kept aside for the English classes. I'm getting all choked up, Lex, reminiscing. Yeah,
The unlocked word hoard was yours.
Yeah, it just became this horde of stories that I just couldn't get enough of. And that just influenced my art, my reading, and just like was always there. My love of stories in general, right? Like in the Joseph Campbell sort of way.
Sure. So was the Odyssey one of those books that you would sort of revisit over the years, or you should sort of like it's just part of your storytelling DNA, and you just moved into other spaces and places?
I mean, I wouldn't really reread it like until I hunted down the audiobook version of Emily Wilson's most recent translation. That was like what, 2019 or something.
Yeah.
So that's the nut translation, which everyone says Nolan used, which was cool.
Mhm.
So it was many, many years since, reading it for the first time and then just pursuing all sorts of other kind of reading, but it was always there because, seeing the movie versions, right? The Kirk Douglas version.
Oh yes, Ulysses. Yep.
The Ulysses, but also the things like that bow and arrow finale. Just it's we see it constantly in front of so many movies, right? Because there's a specific movie production studio that uses that sequence as part of their title graphic, and I'm totally forgetting the name of the movie studio, but it's really, you'll see a lot of movies and you'll see a really like a statue of Ulysses in bronze grabbing the bow and arrow and shooting it through the axis.
Oh yes. I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
LCM Cinema or something like
Right.
that.
Legendary Pictures, maybe. Yeah, but you're right. You're talking about the opening moment before the actual movie starts, where you have the production companies, and there's a famous one of a bronze animated Odysseus firing the arrow through the 12 axe heads. Yeah, and I think it's maybe Legendary Pictures. Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, but that image, like, it's just always been this feedback loop. So every time I see that image, it just like, I just reminisce on the whole cycle of the story. And so I'm always noticing how the Odyssey is everywhere, like, and seeing Christopher Nolan's version just really spotlight. Holy moly, it spotlighted it,
Yeah. Well, for myself, the Odyssey is definitely in my own DNA, and one of the very first stories I ever discovered reading, not so much the straight up epic poem, but story versions of it in illustrated books. I have a very fond memory of a sort of a children's Odyssey. It was prose with these great illustrations by, I want to say his name is Willie Hogany. To get these just very delicate and sort of Art Deco inspired illustrations that peppered the novelization. And so that sort of gave me a sense of like, oh, these are what these ancient Greek characters look like, and so that was very informative. And then in college, I studied classics, so I was a Greek and Roman um, studies major, primarily with Hellenist focus. So that was the Greeks, and the Odyssey is the thing that I just would read and reread. Multiple different translations. I have a fondness for Robert Fitzgerald's translation. I did read Emily Wilson's, and I enjoyed that. And I guess there's a new one by Daniel Mendelsohn, which I'm looking forward to getting. So it's funny. It's just a story that I live and breathe every day. It's just sort of, and now that I'm adapting it for my own Kid Beowulf story, I'm even with it more so. And what's interesting to me is that I don't know if I can have a distanced, objective review about any sort of film that's inspired by the Odyssey. So I'll put that up front. Um, but hearing how people are coming to the film is really interesting, like what their personal connection is to the Odyssey, if they have one, if it's a sort of thing that they remember reading in school or studied or didn't, if they're coming to it fresh. I mean, that's really exciting to sort of see this cultural moment and people coming to this story or revisiting it, and I'm excited about that because whatever your take is on the film, it gets us talking about this great story, which is the basis for all the things that we love that are happening currently, whether it's in comics or movies or what have you. It's just sort of the Odyssey is one of the pillars of the Western worldwide canon of literature. So it's great that we're able to talk about it and find an excuse to talk about it. So that said, now that we sort of know our baseline for where the Odyssey lives and for us, tell me, I guess maybe the first part of this we'll just talk about our top line take on the film, and then we can move into a spoiler space for 3,000-year-old epic toward the end. But it's also fair because this is a Nolan film, and per his other films, he is twisty and turny, just like uh, the master tactician Odysseus. So, Patrick, what's your hot take on Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey?
Well, okay, if I had to distill it in a sentence, I would say that Christopher Nolan doesn't have to ever do a movie again, right? Like every movie in his entire filmography, he kind of found a way to fit into this one. And
Hmm.
and I think that is such a Nolan-esque take on maybe how on Odysseus and the Odyssey itself, right? Like the Odyssey is so meta, right? There's stories within stories. You don't meet the character until you like the character's reputation precedes him, which is something that the movie does straight away, which I really enjoyed. Um, and just to keep it short, it was probably his most moving film. Like of all the movies, I always associated him with very cerebral puzzle box type movies. And so with this one, I mean, not only was it like a sensory experience, right? Like the IMAX is kind of like a prerequisite if you want to get the whole experience.
Which
And
you did see it in IMAX, is that correct?
I did,
Okay.
and so yeah, it's just you need that bigness and that scope to really feel it, right? Because so much of it is like a sensory thing. And then it was very affecting. Like it really lingered on like an emotional level, which is something that a lot of his movies I've never really clocked, right? Like his movies linger in an intellectual space as like, oh, how did he give the clues and what was the puzzle behind it? Where this one had that, but it also had a lot of like, it made me start questioning how he feels about the movie, right? So there was something in there that was moving. But you saw, I mean, I've seen it like it's been over a week since I've seen it because I got to do that. I needed some time to write the article, right? They
Right.
got it in early. You got a much more immediate impression. You saw it just the other night.
Yeah, I just saw it yesterday. I didn't do the IMAX, but I did do a very nice big theater with good picture and solid sound. And I'm still frankly wrestling with it. I really do. I think actually time and distance is maybe the best thing to really um, consider this film because there is so much on the screen that's such a very specific take that Nolan has. I really do like how you've parsed like his other films that are like he does sort of always work on this intellectual plane and the puzzle box approach, and all of his films they're sort of stripped of emotion. His films would tend to be very gray. They tend to be you know dour and they're very the earth, so to speak. Like they're always everything's sort of in gray tones, and that continues with the Odyssey. Those that it looks like a Christopher Nolan movie. It sounds like a Christopher Nolan movie, meaning it's really loud, uh, and in some cases frustrating to like, what did they say? I can't hear them. Um, but he also takes he deviates from the narrative that those of us who are very connected or know the Odyssey really well, he makes different storytelling choices. In some cases, I think they're fascinating. In other cases, they're puzzling. And so I very much wanted to love the film. Uh, I like the film, and as I said before, I'm kind of still wrestling with the film. I think it probably needs another viewing. Perhaps I will see it in IMAX. Maybe that'll change my POV. There is the so much for me while I was watching the film. I was just trying to not bump against it in the choices he was making, and just sort of let it took me a while to sort of get into it and then decide like, okay, well, this is not how I would do it, but it's how he's doing it, and I have to let him do it because that is the other beauty of the epic and all stories for storytellers like us is that everybody can have their own point of view and present it. And if you sell that point of view, then it's a valid point of view. And I think he did. Like his POV is very much Odysseus as the hero of the Trojan War wrestling with PTSD. Um, and and that is his take, and that's what he runs through the entire um, through line of the film. And it's a valid POV. And maybe for a film that is for a story that is so grand in scope, maybe that's the only one he could really kind of tackle. Because there are lots of variations to how you can approach the Odyssey. So I guess my hot take is if you like Christopher Nolan movies, you will love the Odyssey. If you love the Odyssey, this is the version of it that's worth going to and um, worth watching and worth considering, because it is a very interesting take on it. Yeah, I don't know if there's anything in that top line review that strikes you that's worth teasing out, or you tell
Well,
me.
yeah. Well, there's one thing that there's two things I want to ask you, right? The second one, I'll start with the second one, which is, I'd like to know, like, what is the thing that was like, oh, I would have done it differently. But before that, I want to kind of just comment on something that you're saying, because it's like, is Christopher Nolan's movie, The Odyssey, doing a similar job today as Homer's Odyssey was doing back in the day, in terms of like conveying not just the details of the story, but like, especially if we consider like its origins as an oral, in oral history, like if there's something there about like, the story preceding the telling of the story, and how people, you know, might it be that people already, the Odyssey is always in conflict with people's personal take of the Odyssey, even back when it was first being, put down on paper. So I wonder.
Yeah, that's intriguing. And it touches on what your earlier point, and it's something I think Nolan does beautifully, he does it really nicely in the Odyssey, is that complicated kind of story on top of story. The way that he weaves in different narrative threads. I mean, that's where it probably comes from, the Odyssey. It's a story that starts in media res, and you start with the gods on Mount Olympus, and then Ithaca, and then we don't really get to Odysseus until 5 books in. So same sort of thing, the way that he structured it here, and weaving those threads. And so much of the flashback story of the Trojan War, um, he depicts that, as it's depicted in Homer's epic. It's always in flashback, and it's from different points of view, and so it's sort of, what the characters have heard versus what they're being told, but we don't we don't witness it. We're only witnessing it through their retelling. So it is, yeah, it is fascinating to see how he plays around with those with the telling of the tale and who is telling it, because um, the Odyssey has many narrators, one of which is Odysseus, and so can you trust the narrator in this instance? So I did like that. I very much appreciated that. Some of the things that, I mean, I don't know, maybe we save this for the spoilery part. What was your take on the different actors and the casting and the performances?
I mean, they were all top notch, right? Like, I mean, how can we not like have to contend with the internet uproar about the casting of Helen of Troy? And yet I can't help but think of the movie Troy, where all those Greeks were like had British accents, right? So, you know, I mean, I think something that like I think Nolan was really conscious of what he was doing with his castings to put like Lupita Nyong'o to like to differentiate her beauty by like that skin tone. And really, like, I mean, at some points she almost looks blue, how dark and how this the whole thing was color graded,
Mm,
which called to mind all of like, whatever the Bhagavad Gita and like, all the mythology of blue people, right? And the associations of like blueness with divinity. And so there was something there that seemed to be like hitting. Like I was ambivalent to the casting of Matt Damon. I don't know who I would have preferred,
right.
and he kind of disappeared enough into the role that it didn't really like I didn't really struggle with it. I kind of liked how we got to see timeline based on the length of his beard. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
You
Something you could
know?
relate to, perhaps.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, so overall, like, understanding that it's an American movie, and so like not needing British accents and not needing like 100% Greek um casting either, so it kind of sat in that space that was acceptable. John Leguizamo, great work. He didn't
Hmm.
have a like what was his accent there,
Yeah.
um I struggled with the dad, but then like because of my own personal upbringing, I never used the term dad, so it always feels alien to me, right? I call my father Pa, but that's just, where I'm from. So,
Right.
those little details I could kind of just move past or just note and then try and see if there was something Nolan was trying to do with those choices.
Right. Yeah. I think in terms of the casting for me, like I Matt Damon did a perfectly fine job in this version of Odysseus, which is to say, I guess my entire take on this is like just prefacing it by saying this is Nolan's Odyssey. I mean, clearly is. So, is that who I would have cast? No. Does he look Greek? No. Does he have? Does he show guile or any trickery or any charm at any point in this film? No. There's just like, and I think you actually do need that for Odysseus. He is the wily trickster. I mean, that's what, and so I was a little frustrated that there was none of that in this. Perhaps toward the end when he's the beggar, he is in disguise, he is being wily, but there are many moments throughout the film, throughout the story, where we could have gotten a glimpse, like a smile, something. I guess what bothers me is in this film, like many of Nolan's films, it is humorless, it is colorless, it is sexless, it is sort of it's a big budget epic sweep, and beautifully rendered on the film, but it's sort of devoid of all the wonderful things that is the Odyssey, in my opinion. I mean, yes, there are some gods and monsters, and bows and arrows and suitors and fights, but it's just sort of like there's kind of some elemental qualities to the Odyssey, the fancifulness that is part of it. That's all stripped away. But that is per Nolan. That's so. you can't really criticize a thing when you know what you're going to get. I think maybe perhaps I was hoping for something a little different. So, so, but the other casting, I didn't, it didn't really bother me at all. The American accents, uh, I guess it didn't, that didn't bother me so much as the writing. There are moments where there are these beautiful vistas and really interesting shots, like the how he filmed the sequence in the Cyclops cave is really intriguing, and some of those other elements, the sirens, and the other perils, and some just great quiet moments too. I wish he could write as well as he can shoot a film. I mean, the writing is so plodding and clunky, and it's delivered the same way, and that really, I bumped up against that too. I just kept waiting for there to be some poetry in the poem, that's on screen. So again, I sound probably like a real downer on this film, and I don't want to be. Like I said, I really wanted to love it, and the more I think about it, the more it sort of, I get a little frustrated. So maybe this is the moment where we dive into the spoiler.
I think so. Well, okay, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, let me ask you a question. Well, here's one thing. I think some of his poetry is in the visuals, right? Because he's
Yes.
more of a visual, artist, I guess, than a literary one. So I mean, like a really quick example is like the use of black and white. Like, Nolan's always dark and gritty, and so I remember there being a lot of complaints about the black armor,
Yes.
and all of the blackness and whatnot, right? And that was the case until I saw the Trojans dressed all in white, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, he's just using basic Western black hat, white hat imagery. It's
Mm.
that nobody realizes until the last 20 minutes of the movies that, wait a minute, we're the bad guys, right?
Oh, okay.
Like
Yeah.
that I thought was like one of Nolan's like kind of meta tricks where he, you know, maybe this could just be me imagining it. I'm sure it definitely is, but maybe there's a kernel of truth in that, him being aware that people expect these dark and gritty movies, and him leaning into this thing and being like, oh well, let's just have the Greeks wear black and we'll have the Trojans wear white, so that we could really drive home the realization that Odysseus has, that he's, actually an agent of empire, and
Right.
that's where it's
Right.
got some of the Oppenheimer stuff going on, right? Where Oppenheimer
Yes.
invents the bomb. We can imagine that this version of Odysseus invents what, like urban warfare, as opposed to like ranks charging, each other. He's
Well,
the
the subterfuge of the horse is what he's wrestling with. Is that's the key that unlocked the walls of Troy that they couldn't get into for 10 years, and so and which they bump up against the idea of him breaking Zeus's law, and that the Xenia and the get and the hospitality, that it, that that message certainly works in this film. Let's not forget, you know, they were going to war. The Greeks and Trojans were fighting each other for 10 long years prior to that. So it's like, it can't be all on Odysseus's shoulders. But I see what he was doing. The armor is interesting. Uh, there was a lot of back and forth in the early days when those trailers came out, and hardcore classicists more so than me were complaining about the depiction of the armor. Um, I wish there was a little bit more color to it. I do like your white hat, black hat explanation. That I think that's it's a good way to look at it. Speaking of armor, the moment where they encounter the Lastrygonians, who are the giants, uh, that was interesting, and part of me thought at that moment, like, when did this turn into Excalibur all of a sudden? It's just sort of like,
Yeah.
and
It took me a while to figure out who they were, right? And so I kept having to lean into like, um, you know, you the is this something about like there's always someone stronger than you kind of thing, you know? Here are these bronze slash iron age heroes who just won a war, and then they get their butts kicked by people in steel, you know, like, and just like the whole idea, like immediately in the, you know, so we have a child who's the size of a man, already dressed in armor, but not as much armor as the others. And so you can almost already infer like a culture that's just built about like, you know, as they grow older, they just get more and more encased in armor, right? And so like
Mm.
their eldest giants are just like a giant walking tank or whatever. And so it just seemed like, and then just the fact that they just immediately just walked up and were like, "Oh, strangers, wipe them out," you know, as opposed to like in the story, there's a little bit more of a clash of cultures.
Yeah, they're cannibals in the story, and they're just, you know, big giants that Odysseus and his men bump into, and then you know, they're on this cliff top, and as they escape, boulders are hurled over and demolish some of the ships. I understand why he probably had to depict them differently than what we saw with the Cyclops to make sure there just wasn't any confusion between the two races, perhaps. But it did seem, it's a great visual. It just sort of seemed a little out of left field. Again, I like your interpretation. And it's just another thing to consider. One of the things that I guess I bumped up against was the encounter with the Cyclops in the cave, which visually is really intriguing and really well filmed, and you know, the nod to Goya, and you know, the Kronos eating his children, that's certainly there, which was fun to see. It moved in a very, you know, otherworldly way, and the way that the eye was just sort of slightly askew, and but just think generally, I just feel like that's a missed opportunity in storytelling, because it is such a famous scene, and it's really the scene that solidifies Odysseus as the trickster, more so perhaps than even the Trojan horse, is how he outwits Polyphemus. And I was, you know, we just don't get that at all. They just sort of blunder into the cave, and then sort of boorishly get their way out. And you're not supposed to feel sympathetic for the Cyclops, but they make you feel sympathetic for the Cyclops. So uh that I felt just didn't land for me. How was your feeling about that scene? Did it work for you?
I mean, I was impressed that the Cyclops was like genuinely like creepy and kind of scary, you know, and so yeah, so for me, I could accept the like hearing you describe it really makes me think of Matt Damon's Odysseus as like a middle manager Odysseus, you know, where a lot of his
Yeah.
wit is devoted to just keeping his crew from self-destructing, you know, and ultimately he fails, right? But like it seems like a lot of his, you know, the biggest expression of his wits is his decision to not tell them about the catch 22 choice of Charybdis versus Zilla.
Right.
So within the cave, it kind of made sense where he was the one who was like, "Don't kill him." Although I didn't think they'd be able to kill him with a sword the way that it looked like, you know.
Yeah.
The fact that he was like, "No, because we need him to, you know, to open up the boulder," was like the most that they showed of his wit. But within there, it just was really like it was like the signal of like true alienness. Like they had left the, and because this is something that, you know, I write about a lot in my comics, the mundane world versus the realm of heroes. And like this is where Odysseus kind of left being a war hero and then started becoming like a legendary hero.
Yeah.
You know? So that was kind of the best I could see it. And I can kind of see how like the conversation would have worked against that betrayal. Like it was easier to, you know, to do what he and his crew did, blinding the Cyclops, right? Oh, by the way, I brought this guy out just to see if you can see him. my little Cyclops right there.
That's funny. I have one of my own right here. They can say hi to each other.
Oh, excellent. They can see eye to eye.
Oh man,
Anyway,
very nice.
so I brought
Uh,
him. I was gonna bring him to the movies, but I couldn't find him in time. But yeah. So I mean, I was more taken by the fact, like, I don't think the Cyclops would have been as scary, even with the eating of people, if there was a conversation going on. You know?
Perhaps, yeah. No, I mean it's very much of a horror movie part, and you're and you know we are put in the shoes of Odysseus's men and the fear they're in. So yeah, uh it works within the universe that Nolan is depicting. I just again it's me bumping against the story I know so well, and then this artist's version of it. There are other things I thought were just tremendous. I mean, talk about horror movie. Um, Samantha Morton's Circe and that whole um, event was just really well depicted and scary and fun to watch. How she would mangle their heads and faces into the snouts and ears of pigs, and how they were just sort of eating all the all of the innards at the table, and couldn't even control themselves, and that was remarkable.
Yeah. I mean, I thought that was really well done. I mean, talk about some extreme body work, right? Like you said about it being sexless, right? Like, we had Charlize Theron to be like the alternate love interest, right? Um, so having Circe be like, you know, the anti matron, right? Like a kind of a
Mm,
fire mother, where it's just like, it's presumed she's there to offer sanctuary and comfort until you start seeing all the details that
right.
reveal actually not. I mean, I didn't really like the whole how he got out of that situation. I don't think it was, even on the big IMAX, it wasn't really clear that he like reached into the bird cage and grabbed the crow and threatened it.
Is that what he did? I totally missed that, because again, here's the episode with Circe where in the poem, I think he's definitely given help by Hermes, who tells him how to win over Circe, and of course the gods are stripped out of this version of the Odyssey. But how he I totally missed that in the film that I was watching. So tell me again how he grabs the crow.
Right. So in that scene, right, it's he's sitting at the table with Circe, and then there's also a crow that's like to his left in a cage, and they're kind of like, the crow is trying to participate in the conversation with it. It's kind of expressing a personality. And so he had shown her his dagger and placed it on the table, right? With a
Yeah,
point facing him, which is proper martial arts etiquette, as we all know, right? You don't, if you're going to hand a weapon to someone, you hand it facing you. You don't hand them you don't hand them the sharp end. Um, so that was all set up. But then Circe grabs the knife and puts it to his throat, threatening to kill him, saying, why can't I just kill you right now? And he really, like, blink and you miss it. He just says, I'll wring the bird's neck, because he has already inferred that it was, more than a bird, right? He saw that the deer he shot was actually a man.
right.
He kind of was already putting the pieces together. And so they just didn't really stage it and choreograph it in a way that you could really see it. The bird should have just been on a perch, so that so it would be more plausible that he could grab it, instead of like reaching into the cage, which is what is presumably going on. So it
Yeah.
was it was just like one of those instances. It's like a Jason Bourne type instance where clear choreography should have been the priority to communicate the story. And here it just was like a kind of a blink and you miss it showdown. In the literature, Hermes gives him a magical herb, moly, right? Which I
Hmm.
wonder, is this where we get the term holy moly? Um, and so it's like magic against magic. But you know, of
Yeah.
course, in the literature, the gods are like in the mix constantly, which is really not the case at all in the Nolan
Right.
adaptation.
Well, and even the sub gods, for instance, you mentioned Charlize Theron. She plays Calypso. Uh, and this was one of the storytelling turns that I did think was well done in that, he does condense and combine some things. The land of the Lotus Eaters and Odysseus is a 7 year enslavement, so to speak, with Calypso is conflated and or combined, and so she nurses him back to health, and also gives him the leaf of the lotus, which gives him amnesia. And so there's he's trying to remember his past and through her prompting, and but she's also fallen in love with him. It doesn't want him to leave, and so you got a mix of those two perils from the Odyssey, and I thought that was elegant. I thought, um, even though perhaps Charlize Theron was a little wasted in that role. There could have been more that could have been done with Calypso, but again, I think that's one of those instances where if you didn't know the Odyssey really well, you might be sort of scratching your head like, well, who is this woman and what is her role here? And um, so there's a little bit of a shorthand there, but still, I thought that was a neat turn all the same.
Agreed. I mean, although she could have offered him more, right? I think it would have had a stronger impact if she had more to offer than just like, beach time. If she had a palace, if she had like
Yeah,
something like almost like the Nausicaa, like add a little Nausicaa in there and saying, oh, he could have all of this, but he still wants to go back. I think
right.
could have
Yeah.
been done. But
Yeah, not having the Phaeacians, the Phaeacians, and the land of the island of Scheria and Nausicaa, I thought, again, he made those choices to condense it, but and those are certainly fanciful elements that, as we've already discussed, he stripped all the fantasy out of this very war-driven version of the Odyssey. Are there any other standout moments to you, like from your Kung Fu magazine eye, that you appreciated? The moments when he gets back to Ithaca and the trial of the bow. There have been many trials of the bow depicted on film. How did you find this one?
and I mean, I like that it was two axes. That was fun. As a Kung Fu magazine writer, there was a scene there that was like a callback to a specific kung fu weapon,
Hmm.
which I kind of liked. So in the midst of all the chaos, he grabs one of the axes and starts swinging it around, but it was connected by the axe head to the other axe, right? So he's actually, it's not really a bladed weapon he's using, right? It turns into more of like a flail, right? Two big sticks connected together. Calls to mind the nunchucks.
Uh-huh.
Calls to mind there's a different kind of double section staff in martial arts where it's one long staff with a short staff on the end for doing the same thing. And then there's a set of bladed weapons called twin tiger hooks, which you can imagine them as swords with hooks on the end and blades coming out of the bottom. And one of the popular techniques that can be done with that is that you hook together the two hooks and then let one hand go so that you could swing the weapon on the hook and use that dagger that's on the end as your cutting edge. So you could effectively like double your reach with one maneuver, with one kung fu move. So
Hmm.
that came to mind. I never added this in the article, but that came to mind when I saw Matt Damon swinging around the double axes.
Those were the extra weapons that Telemachus was just trying to throw down through the ceiling above him.
Well, there was all of that too, but like the axes that were used for the
Yeah.
axe test, right? When he busted that out, I just kind of was like, "Oh, twin tiger hooks, how fun!" I mean, there was some fun Jason Bourne type of actions, like at the Temple of Athena, with the way he, you know,
Yes.
how to disarm a bladed weapon. I could just imagine the article that would be the step-by-step motions of how he did that. So I
Right.
mean, those things were fun for me in particular. And then there was like the underworld, right? What did you think of
Oh
the
yes,
underworld?
that was yeah. The underworld was really interesting. I liked the depiction. I guess yes and no. I mean, it was filmed really evocatively, and I guess I wished for a little bit more of um some spirits. Like the dead were just sort of caked in the earth. I guess that works when you consider the rest of the quote unquote effects that are in this film. It's pretty stripped down. Um, and that was very theatrical. I think it, for that sequence, I almost felt I was watching a stage play, the way that they were, framed and shown. And so that was I like that. Tiresias was really cool and freaky. Um, I wish we maybe perhaps would have seen Achilles, but they really leaned into Agamemnon for the thematic beats of
Mhm.
the film. Um, so yes, I did like the depiction of the underworld, even though I thought it would have been, I don't know, a couple Ray Harryhausen skeletons. Is that not going to work in this film? I guess probably not.
I know, if only. No, well, okay, so it was that underworld scene that really drove home my thinking that Agamemnon was being used as a as a personification of empire, where he's just like he's not throughout the whole movie, he is pretty much not human at all. You only just see like the shell of armor, the shell, like the conquest, right? The machine of conquest.
Yeah.
And so it really just gave me that sense of like, okay, so this is Nolan's thesis, right? He feels guilty for being like a participant in Empire, and he's like pleading with all of the vets who are coming home from whatever military service, to watch this movie and don't do those bad things that we're showing you in the movie. Like it
Mm,
all seemed to be wrapped around this sense of like, you know, that Oppenheimer guilt, and then like being a cog in the machine of conquest, and how Agamemnon was at his best as a machine of conquest, and when he peeled the armor away, you know, he
right.
got.
Yeah. No, that's another really great uh, perceptive POV. Um, and this is all just a week later. You've just figured it all out for me, so I appreciate that. You've let it sit and marinate, and your keen mind has unraveled all the puzzle boxing of Nolan. So it does, yeah, it is a film I'm going to revisit. Like, just like the text it springs from, it is worthy of, I think, repeated viewings, and now that I sort of know it whole cloth, what he was going for, I think I can probably go back and appreciate what he was doing in his version. Um, do we want to talk about the big twist, the Athena Zendaya reveal? Do we want to perhaps keep that?
I mean, I
We'll
thought
leave
that
that
was
for the
we could. Do you want to like reserve it for your Patreons only or something?
maybe one. We'll just. I'll just say that there is a Nolan. As he's wont to do. There is a reveal, so to speak, the spinning top of a revelation, and very well done. He's very very good. This Nolan guy, is good, and so uh, props to him across the board for making this film. As I said at the top, it's not the Odyssey as I would have perhaps wanted, but it is certainly worthy of an adaptation amongst across all the different versions that there are, and certainly I wish it all the success, because then that just means more people are going to discover Odysseus and the Odyssey, and hopefully get them to read the original poem, and maybe see you know the similarities and where it differs. So
Yeah. I mean, maybe, especially for nerds like us, it's not the Odyssey we want, but maybe it's, speaking broadly, it's the Odyssey we deserve.
ah. There you go. Bringing it home.
Yeah, you'll have to watch the movie to figure that one out. And I myself am trying to channel Odysseus just to figure out a way to get back into the theater again as soon
Yeah.
as possible, you know?
Yeah, and I think the second time I see it, I would like to try it on the IMAX for sure and see if that version brings it home for me, so to speak. So, well, Patrick, this is super fun. I really appreciate you hopping on. For those who want to discover more of your great work, where can we send them?
I have two websites. My personal website is plugoarts.com. I blog about various things like the movie reviews. You know, there's stuff that doesn't fit into the movie review that I'll bring over to the blog. Most recently, I was writing about how I got an invitation to go and actually tour that longship that Christopher Nolan used, right? Like, thanks to press credentials, I can go and walk around on that deck. All I would have
Wow.
to do is get to Oslo, Norway to do so, you know?
We'll start it. We'll start a crowdfunder for you.
Or I better start rowing now, you know? Um, so there's plugoarts.com. I have a newsletter. I do comics in your inbox every month. Lots of fun. I have fun doing that. And then there's a tigerstale.com, which is where you can find, you know, A Tiger's Tale and Kung Fu Ghost Killer. I've got like the first 20 pages of my graphic novel there so people can just have a taste. And then I'm Plugo or Plugo Arts on, you know, social media. And
Okay.
so you can find me there. And Lex, I want to congratulate you also on the success of your own Odyssey, right? Like knocking it out of the park, you know, in terms of like your campaign goal right off the bat.
Well, I
So
appreciate it. Thanks. Yeah, it's been a good month. It's been exciting to run the Kickstarter. I think the thing I've most enjoyed is this little experiment of I don't know. Podcasting or just chatting with other creators and getting their POVs on the Odyssey and their own work. That's been really fun. Perhaps I'll continue that down the road in some other form. I'm excited that folks are enjoying what I've been sharing throughout the month on my website and Webtoon. And so yeah, it's great to see the response, and I'm excited to just keep chugging away on Kid Beowulf Odyssey because that is where I will be for the foreseeable future. So
hopefully less than 10 years, right?
oh my gosh, yeah, that would be maybe we can really chop that down in thirds.
Yeah, let's speed run it.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
also, you know, we should also mention that you know, such a big fan of your project. I did a little bit of a pinup, some fan art of the Kid Beowulf crew, which
Yes, absolutely. The trio, you did a great, really beautiful piece of Beowulf, Grendel, and Hama that I'm going to share. I'm going to throw it up here on the video right now, and then I'm going to also share it out for patrons and in the Kickstarter update, so folks can check out Patrick's artwork. And you gave Beowulf uh, Hama is wielding Nagling as he is now the new owner, but you also felt as though Beowulf needed an axe. Tell me about that.
oh, I just, you know, I mean, how convenient that axes become relevant for the Odyssey. But it was really just I wanted a callback to his Viking-esque roots, you
Yeah,
know. And I just couldn't get that image out of my mind of him like, you know, maybe jumping off of his brother's shoulder to have that like complete midair, you know, attack.
fastball special with the axe. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I just was like, oh, you know, Hama's already got the sword, and that's like, you know, a named sword. So let's just throw, you know, throw a
I
wild
like it.
in there.
I'm
He's
gonna Yeah. If Beowulf ends up with an axe down the road, well, we know where that started. So
awesome. We could explore the mythology of axes and other such weapons.
right, right. Well, this has been super fun. And thank you for your very insightful take on the Odyssey. Chatting with you has made me realize that I do need to revisit it, even though I'm wrestling with it internally, it's certainly a movie worth seeing and worth thinking about. So thank you.
You're welcome. This is the kind of way I like to write my articles, right? I don't presume to be a critic that says it's good or bad. I would rather just, give people seeds that they could then, plant along the way and see if something grows from it.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Shop Talk, brought to you by Kid Beowulf Odyssey. Funding now at kidbcomickickstarter.com.